Hi there. I want to share a few brief words of Torah with you about this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayeira. The opening of the Parsha is extremely well known. More or less, on a very superficial reading of it, God appears to Abraham. Abraham is feeling poorly, both physically and emotionally. Poorly because it's 3 days after his Brit Milah, after his circumcision, as well as emotionally. Why? Because he's bereft of guests. God had taken the sun out of its shell, and he increased the level of intensity of the heat emitted by the sun, so that people would stay indoors and leave Avraham alone. And yet Avraham stayed there by his doorway, looking forlorn, uncertain, upset, because he was dying for some guests. Why was he dying for guests? What message was it that he was attempting to do? Was it only about him? And was he just a do-gooder who wanted to do good for other people? And he felt badly if he wasn't able to do good for other people? No, of course not. The Gemara tells us that the purpose of Avraham's chesed was to teach about God, to spread the message of monotheism to humanity. And when people would eat in his home, he would say, "Don't thank me, thank God." The art scroll in the Stone Chumash makes a point that a tzaddik is never content with past accomplishments. Consider, Avraham has done chesed up until this point, up until his Brit Milah, up until the circumcision. He will continue to do so when he heals. Why can't he wait? What's the big deal? The answer is a tzaddik, somebody who's in it for the right reasons, who's passionate about serving Hashem, cannot rest upon his laurels. He cannot just rely upon past accomplishments. He consistently and continually seeks to grow and improve himself. A very famous Rosh Hashiva, my Rosh Hashiva from Yeshivas Mir, Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, passed away this week. A very, very sad time, a very tragic time for all the Jewish people. A tremendous amount of people relied upon him for many, many things. His yeshiva was perhaps the largest in the world, with 6,500 plus students. Much can be said. I would like to share one brief story with you about the Rosh Hashiva that I personally witnessed. There's a fellow who currently lives in Waterbury. Some of you may know him because he has become a famous Jewish artist, musical artist, I should say. His name is Rabbi Baruch Levine. Rabbi Baruch Levine and I were in the yeshiva at the same time. He's a few years older than I am. And it was on Yom Kippur evening. Yom Kippur evening, the Rosh Hashiva, who, as you may know, had Parkinson's disease, and he spoke softly, but he had a very difficult time making himself heard as a result of this disease. And so he came in Kol Nidrei night to speak to our minyan, which probably had about 600-700 people in it, mostly Americans. And perhaps the first couple of rows were able to hear him. There was a press, a mass of humanity pressed forth trying to hear the words of the Rosh Hashiva. But it was very difficult, and most people weren't able to hear a word. It was inspiring nonetheless to see somebody who's so passionate, who cares so much about Torah and Judaism, that despite his illness and despite the difficulties, does everything in his power to inspire his students and to grow the yeshiva. Rabbi Baruch Levine went over to the Rosh Hashiva on his way out, and he said to him, "Rosh Hashiva, I hope I'm not being chutzpahdik, but please, I was unable to hear what you had to say, and I'm dying to hear the words of inspiration that you shared." And the Rosh Hashiva, rather than being upset and thinking, what a chutzpah, how could a person talk like this and do this? Doesn't he know how sick I am? He reached over and he gave Rabbi Baruch Levine a big hug. And he said, finally, somebody who cares enough, who's passionate enough, because this is the trait of the Rosh Hashiva. And this is the trait of Avraham Avinu, someone who cares so much about doing the right thing, that against all odds, against sickness, against come what may, their goal in life is to serve Hashem to their utmost. With this, I want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom. May we all merit serving Hashem to our utmost, in the best possible way, not mitoch yisurin, not from amongst affliction and suffering, but from shalom v'shalva, from peace and serenity. Shabbat Shalom.